Te ho ki te uru, whakataka te ho ki te tonga. Kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā tara tara ki tai. E hi aki ana te atakura. He teo, he huka, he ho hu. Ti hei Māori ora. Kia ora everybody, welcome. Apologies this morning, Anne for lateness, Anne Galloway. And we have... I have to take a call at some time this morning. Oh, that's nice. Any idea what time? And who's it from? Okay. All right. Thank you, Tim. And Catherine Chu, early departure at 10 for a meeting. And Aaron as well.
Yeah, at the same time. I don't think we'll be that long, but...
Okay. And we have Melanie Coker and James Goff attending by Zoom. Welcome, guys. So will someone give me a heads up if they need to ask a question, I assume? So... you want to move the apologies? Tim, seconded. Sam, all those in favour say aye. Aye. Opposed, that's carried. We've got no declarations of interest and, we have no declarations of interest at this stage. If you have any, please declare them as we go along, that would be good. No public forum and no petitions this morning. So we'll move on to items 7, 8 and 9, which are all minutes. The Banks Peninsula, Christchurch, West Melton and Selwyn-Waihora Zone Committee minutes. I'd like to move those all at once. So Mike moves, seconded Jimmy. All those in favour say aye. 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 Opposed? That's carried. And that takes us through to item 11, which is the Triennial Zone Committee Update Report. Would the three Zone Committee chairs like to come up at the same time, perhaps? And does that suit you? I think it might be a good idea, and we can, and if there's any questions from the minutes, now's a good time to ask them. And sorry, committee members, I omitted item 9, the minutes of the last meeting. Do we have a mover? Jake, seconded by Mike. All those in favour say aye. 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 Opposed, that's carried. So welcome, everybody. Do you have any highlights you'd like to raise? We've got Kevin and we've got Weibel from Banks Peninsula.
Gina Weibel.
Gina. And Selwyn-Waihora.
Anne Galloway is speaking on behalf of the Selwyn-Waihora.
Oh, right. Thank you. So any questions, we'll have to wait until she arrives. Okay.
Okay, good morning. Thanks for hearing us today. This is for the Banks Peninsula Water Zone Committee. A key point highlighted in the report is that the committee would like to encourage council to consider mechanisms for the reuse of water, reducing use and increasing storage for communities and individuals on Banks Peninsula, for example, through the use of water tanks. This has come out from our water quantity working group with research done by a summer student finding that when surface water takes for domestic and stock water are overlaid with consented takes, especially where there are reticulated community supplies, there is likely potential for significant impacts on the ecological health of streams, and this will likely get worse with climate change. The Zone Committee are raising the issue as Te Mana o Te Wai, which puts the stream health first, means that there are likely to be issues with consented water takes Council has for reticulated water supplies. Water availability may also need to be more strongly taken into account when considering future development on Banks Peninsula, particularly as it appears that existing rules for permitted takes already allow more water to be taken than is acceptable for the environment in many places. Water quantity has been an issue of concern to the Zone Committee for some time. It's been a bit of a process to go through to have some recognition, but ECAN now agree that it will likely require some changes to plans. Summarising the rest of the report, community engagement that we've undertaken includes a stall at the Little River AMP show that included interactive activities such as flax weaving and a fish passage water play activity. We had an information session for the community after concerns were raised around the planned harvesting of pine forest on Moapuku Peninsula, particularly relating to sediment getting into Whakaraupo, Littleton Harbour, and which species will be replanted following harvesting. We've met with the Banks Peninsula Community Board to discuss how we can better work together, particularly as a comparison of our plans shows a lot of alignment, especially around biodiversity, climate change, and community engagement. Other items from our report include an update on the Whakaraupo Inaka spawning project, which found that in the freshwater saltwater zone where Inaka spawn, of the four streams surveyed, 2 had insufficient flow. 1 has had riparian planting done in the past, but without reshaping the banks first, and so those overhanging banks will probably need to be regraded, and that may damage the planting or may need replanting as well. And the 4th stream will also need regrading. The Zone Committee has discussed joining the Community Waterways Partnership, and we support it, but only once Papatipu Runanga are satisfied that adequate engagement has occurred with them about the Charter, as there was a feeling that there has been some issues with communication. Another issue that the committee are taking further is native afforestation and the suitability of the emissions trading scheme to encourage it. When the new freshwater legislation was announced, committee member and farmer Ben Manson volunteered his property for a pilot study to see how practical it would be to implement some of the new requirements. So he's proposed to retire 24 hectares of sort of fairly low productivity farmland that includes some elevated wetlands, and analysis shows that it wouldn't be financially viable for him to retire that land to fence and plant natives when compared to the potential income from carbon farming if native trees were planted. That would be different if it was pine trees, but that's not what he's wanting to achieve. This work is being shared with ECAN, and it ties in with the Native Forest Climate Change group submission to the Climate Change Commission. Lastly, I'm pleased to report that the committee has welcomed Machu Payne as the new Runanga representative for Kokorarata, and we'll also have 3 new members at our next meeting after the retirement of two members, Garrick Thorne and Paula Smith, and I'd just like to thank them for their contributions. That's what I have today.
Oh, excellent report. Thank you very much. There's a lot happening there. So we'll go through to Kevin.
Kia ora tātou. You've all got copies of the report, so I'd just like to highlight 2 things. It's pleasing to see that Tasman Stream Integrity and Stickwater Living Laboratory have received freshwater improvement funding. For many years, the Zone Committee has recommended and given immediate steps towards the Cashmere Stream Group, and Zone Committee members have helped with planting and working bees along the stream for many years. If you get a chance, it's really a nice exemplar to see what a difference such improvements can bring to a waterway. The restoration work has been done in sections over several years under the guidance mainly of Ken Rouse. And if you walk along the stream, you can get an idea of how the planting looks after 1 year, after 2 years, and after 3 years. And it's really very encouraging. So it's nice to see that they've been funded. The stormwater trailer is now completed and has had a few outings. It was funded jointly by ECAN and this council, and it's a great resource for public participation at community events. It's aimed at both adults and children, and adults who think they're children, and is very eye-catching. There are a number of games that are intended to educate about where stormwater ends up and how it affects the biota in the streams, and what individuals can do to help the problem. And it's really a nice resource, so we thank the council for funding that. Deputy Chair Annabelle and I have had meetings with Clive Appleton recently and council publicity staff about how the Zone Committee can help public engagement on submissions to the proposed Heathcote Stormwater Management Plan. We made suggestions for drop-in centres in the area, and Zone Committee members, together with council staff, will be at these in the next few weeks to go through the submission process. Since the last report to the Council, we've had the launch of the Community Waterways Partnership. It was a Christchurch Zone Committee initiative, and the launch was very successful with a host of organisations signing the charter. The Zone Committee would like to appreciate very much the Council's support for the appointment of Sally Airy to facilitate the partnership. That's a real plus. Our Deputy Chair, Annabelle, has been heading up the working group on the Port Hills Erosion and Sediment, and she will bring you up to date on progress in that area.
Morena, ko Annabelle Hasamanaho. Erosion and sediment control in the Cashmere Stream Port Hills remains a priority for the Zone Committee. And we had a meeting, one of our meetings in April, and we had a presentation from Mark Stevenson from the City Council, Sarah Hulia from ECAN Forestry Resource Management Officer, and Charlie Lyons, the Assistant Ops Manager for the Adventure Park. And this was amazing to bring all these three parties together, because this is a huge issue and there's huge issues of erosion and sediment in those areas, and to bring those three parties together and to start that communication, and there's been follow-ons from that already. Also, the working group has got together in June and looked at the actions that have come out of that group, and also what further work that needs to be done, and the Zone Committee has made recommendations through the LTP process and with reports, and I'll just remind you of those recommendations that we made, and they were to identify the Cashmere Stream and Port Hills as a priority catchment, for City Council and ECAN to seek funding from central government to provide incentives and support for landowners to manage sediment at source, to identify areas of high risk, and that's happening with ECAN and with LiDAR on desktop mapping, to develop a team of staff that specialise in erosion and sediment control across the councils. And so the committee is really keen to hear the outcomes from the ETP from those recommendations.
Thanks very much. Just lately the committee has been busy with workshops rather than formal meetings, and we now have completed an action plan for the next 3 years, taking into account the priorities from Christchurch City Council, Selwyn Council and Environment Canterbury. The committee has a number of actions under 3 main headings at the moment. These are enhancing mahinga kai, engaging the community and raising awareness, primarily concerning stormwater in Christchurch, and enhancing ecosystem health. We're currently working through timing and reporting and required outcomes for these actions under those 3 main headings. And finally, I'd just like to mention that we have a new member, Kakati, from Raupaki Runanga, and we've just said goodbye to 3 of our members, and we thank all of those for their contributions during the last 3 years. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, guys. Since Anne's not here, perhaps we'll just take questions for these 2 zone committees in the meantime. So I know that with the Moipuku Peninsula, so you've requested that you receive some information about the management of the unformed legal road and the foreshore to minimise erosion and sedimentation of the harbour. So is that the main crux of what you're wanting? And has anything changed since you crafted that recommendation to us?
I believe so. We haven't looked at anything else. Yeah.
Yep. So you just want to know where it's at. I'm just wondering if that's enough information to guide staff on what we need. Have you got another? Oh, there we go. Great. So we've just expanded that out. That you can see it on the screen there. So we want some information for you on the status of the plantation, the sediment and erosion controls, the status and management of the paper road, and then the traffic management will have to come into play because it is a road. So are you happy with that?
Yeah. Yes.
Would we have a timeline we could expect that information to go out by? When's your next meeting?
In August.
August?
Yes, so it's mid-August.
Yep, okay, so in time for the next Banks Peninsula Zone Committee meeting in August. Okay, so that's good. So questions, Yanni?
It's a question of staff. Are we able to share the staff response to the submission on the improving the water quality? Like, there's quite detailed submissions from a number of the water care groups that are quite relevant to what the zone committee's interest is. And I see in the report, they're going to write to Councillor Daniels and Deputy Mayor Turner. But I just wondered if we could share the information, the decision making, the advice, and what we've done around the LTP.
Yep, definitely. Well,
So what's the process to do that?
that's the request that was made, particularly around, as Annabelle referred to, their priorities, whether Cashmere Stream, central government support private landowners to control their sediment at source, and have we identified any specialised staff on stormwater control. So rather than coming from Councillor Daniels and Turner, could we just get a staff response to those questions, please? So perhaps another resolution then, another 4.
So all I'm trying to check is the advice we got was actually excellent from staff. They put a lot of thought and detail into what was in our LTP in terms of draft. So can we share that with the water zone committees, because it's quite enlightening. I mean, it doesn't make good reading, but it's the reality of what we've done.
Yes.
And I just think sharing that would be really helpful. I haven't passed it on to anyone, but I do have a number of groups in the water space that I think would be quite interested in seeing that.
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
So should we say on our no, that's all right. Request to provide information to Zone Committee on LTP funding in response to their informal submission, or yes, that's nice. Yeah. So that would encompass all the partnership committees that we've set up, the biodiversity responses, and anything related to sediment control.
Well, could we kind of provide the general water quality advice as well that we got, which is around that 30 million budget?
Yep. Okay. Great. Thanks, Yanni.
Okay.
So the other thing too is I noticed in both the Christchurch West Melton. Oh, Tim, sorry.
Thank you. Nowhere there has it got the relationship between ECAN and council with regards to responsibilities, because Deputy Mayor Turner mentioned about the previous logging further around the harbour, that after a weather event there were logs and debris, etc., that was washed in and caused a major issue and sediment. That is a question with regards to the upholding of the requirements for the resource consent. So I'm just wondering, we can have all the rules we want, but if we don't enforce them or keep an eye on them, then they're a waste of time. So I'm just wondering, I need to know whose responsibility it is and what part of the peninsula falls under council and ECAN. And I'm still confused about that, and I think most people are. So what's our responsibility? Who enforces what? And how can we make sure there's no gaps there? And I would like to know that. Secondly, was the planting done for forestry or for land stability? And I'm still unclear on that, so I'd like to know that as well.
So that would be encompassed in the status of the plantation, I would say.
Well, I'd like it worded, because at the moment, I mean, the fact of the matter is, if it was planted for land stability, then it's very clear to me that that's what it should be for. And then there'd have to be some discussion and about changing that. If it was planted for forestry, I still am concerned with regards to land stability on the faces to the water.
All right, can we put a brackets next to the word plantation and put purpose of the plantation at the time of planting? Is that all right, Tim?
Yep.
I can probably answer some of that now. If you
It's almost purpose of plantation at the time of planting and current purpose.
Current, yep. Current status.
It'd be nice to hear some.
In terms of the rules and responsibility, since that event in 2017 that you were referring to on the neighbouring land, the National Environmental Standard for Forestry has since come into effect, and ECAN now have a dedicated staff member who monitors all forestry harvesting activities, and those are now, the harvesting is now a permitted activity, so consent is not required, but they are required to inform ECAN that they will be harvesting, and that new NES came with more requirements in terms of how it's managed. So that might answer that part of that question. In terms of the purpose of the planting, as far as I understand, it was done for erosion control, and the trees are now at an age where I think it's consensus is that it's reasonable to remove them. If they were kept, they would start to fall over. So I think the question is more around how the harvesting is done and what will be put in place afterwards, and also whether the existence of the paper road might mean that there's a bit more ability to influence how that's done.
Great. Yeah.
I guess two things from that is, if we're going to have a real future vision for this, what would be the replacement planting to native to ensure that we don't have this again and that the sediment runoff is kept to a minimum? The second one is it unreasonable or reasonable of council to ask ECAN for a plan for their monitoring when their harvesting is on? Because they've got one staff member doing the whole thing for forestry, which is, it's a large area, the ECAN area. So I'm just wondering, is that unreasonable of that staff member to oversee this? Because it's great to have rules, but if you're not keeping an eye on them, if once something happens, it happens, and you can fine them or whatever, but the whole idea is to prevent sediment runoff and the damage to this harbour and the environment. So I'm just wondering, is it unreasonable for the zone committee and ourselves to look at and ask for a plan of monitoring? Well, we've got sediment runoff of all building sites right across the Port Hills, and that falls under ECAN, although our building consent officers are picking that up. But it's still happening. So
I think that would be captured under the second bullet point, surely. What you're talking about is enforcement.
No, it's just ensuring that it's managed properly. Yeah. That's all I'm asking, and I think that's what everybody's asking, that if it's going to be done, because technically, if you're saying that the trees there are at a point where they could actually damage the environment if they stay there, if they get blown over, wind blow in a storm or whatever, then that's detrimental to the environment. So what we're looking at is future planning. That's all I don't see.
So I see we've got John Higgins and Brett here. Brett, do you have anything to add that you'd like to bring to the table at this stage that might be pertinent for us? Or are you happy just with this resolution?
Happy with the resolution, but we can provide some information if you want it now.
Okay, thank you. That'll be handy. Verbal?
Yeah, verbal.
Yes, you'd like to come to the...
So the forestry still needs a resource consent from the City Council. It's permitted under as we understand it, from under the ECAN regional plan. So we have been in discussions, and there was a public meeting with the community around this issue, which I attended along with Kent Wilson, and there was some interest in what could go back. So there seemed to be sort of general consensus that the trees were reaching the end of their life and that they would need to be replaced. And the focus of the meeting was what could go back. There is a paper road that goes around the perimeter of the peninsula, and they can't harvest that without council permission. So there is a discussion sort of ongoing with the parks area around if they were to harvest that, what could go back in its place, like natives and that would act as a form of sediment control, and also being natives would be good for the biodiversity, etc.
Right.
So at this stage, we are meeting with Laurie Forestry next week. They are still, we're still in discussions whether the consent from City Council is needed or not. There's quite a complex interpretation issue, hence Brent is with me.
Right.
And that is an ongoing discussion that we're having with them. We're meeting about that next week.
Thank you. So would it be possible to keep the committee and the zone committee updated on the progress of those meetings?
Yes, certainly.
That'd be helpful. Thank you. Very helpful. Right, so the chairs would like to resume their chairs. Thank you. So I noted that both the Selwyn Waihora and the Christchurch West Melton had addressed the nitrates issues in your reports. And particularly, I think you spoke about Tim Chambers' report, and Mike Glover wrote a letter regarding the private bore nitrate testing. And so you probably don't know about that one because it's Selwyn Waihora.
Right.
But do you, Kevin? Do you know anything about it?
No, I don't know about that, but I was at the meeting with the council from Tim. I was
Yes.
here for that meeting.
Yeah.
It's nice to see that it's got traction. It seems to have got quite a lot of traction now. So.
Well, have you heard that it might have been stalled, the government report on that? Have you got any information on that?
No, I'm afraid not. No, I don't.
Well, we're a little bit concerned about it, so we've crafted another resolution here asking Leanne, our Mayor, to write to the Associate Minister to seek clarification about any research that's been done, and to reiterate our support for New Zealand research on the health impact of nitrates in drinking water.
Okay, well, Tim was mentioning that the first phase is over, and they were looking for funding for the second phase, which is the real nitty-gritty, is the correlation between cancer records and nitrate concentrations.
Well, that's right. The first phase, as far as I know, was to actually determine whether a report was justified, and they've said yes, it is. And now the decision to do the study has not been made because of the funding issue, possibly.
I think that's right, and that's my understanding at the moment. But, I'm not privy to those conversations.
And so also, so I think this is what we want clarity on here, and assuming that we're all supportive that that study does go ahead and sooner rather than later, because it would probably take a good year, I'd say.
Indeed.
And also reading in our wonderful press yesterday, did you see that? With the 4 major Kiwi environmental organisations have teamed up to push for the government to set a strict nitrate pollution limit of less than 1 milligram per litre
Yes,
in
I saw
New Zealand
that.
waterways.
Yep.
So that's a joint statement from Forest and Bird, Greenpeace, the Environmental Defence Society, and another group called Choose Clean Water. So we've got a real public awareness raising about this nitrates issue, so I think we should keep our foot on the pedal.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we will, if Leanne's happy to pick that letter up and do another letter. Something you prepared earlier. Lovely. Thank you.
That'd be great.
And
Thank you very
then
much.
when we receive a response, we will share that with the zone committee.
That'd be great.
Yep. All right. Are there any other questions? Yanni?
Regards to that, so when we did the terms of reference for the zone committees last month, there was the ability for ECAN and the zone committees to review existing consents, and given the concern that's been raised around the nitrate levels, I was interested if any consents are being reviewed by ECAN with the zone committees, or the zone committees have the ability to raise the concern with ECAN, because it just really concerns me, I guess, that we have very permissive limits. And we've got an emerging body of research that's showing there could be a risk, and so I just wondered if there were if there was any ability or discussion with the zone committees and ECAN around reviewing some of those consents.
The only gate.
Then, because I was trying to intervene. The point of order is that the current standards are set at the World Health Organization standards, so they can't review consents based on a hope that we review those standards.
Indeed.
And this is what this survey is going to determine, if we need to adjust our own limits.
We have regional limits through the ECANS plan, and we
Yes.
also have Canterbury Water Strategy management targets that do talk about, I think, reduction or stabilising the problem. So,
Yep.
you know, I appreciate there's a World Health Organisation standard. We actually have
That's
our
the
own
drinking water
regional.
standard.
Yeah,
There's also Canterbury Water Management Strategy
Yes, I
target.
know.
Is that
The only way we can, a zone committee can influence ECAN is once every 3 months. I also report to the ECAN Council, and that is the only route that we have, I think.
And that's recommendations
And
only.
that's a recommendation.
Diane, could you come to the table if you have some comments, please?
Just wanted to clarify, sorry, that the Canterbury Water Management Strategy is not a statutory document, and as was mentioned a moment ago, it's the drinking water standards that apply in terms of levels that are acceptable in drinking water.
Thanks, Diane.
And the WHO is very wary about lowering the standard until there's conclusive proof that there is a correlation. So
Yeah, and that's why we're pushing
That's why
for our
we're
own
waiting.
survey to be done
Yep.
that will be applicable to New Zealand.
but the pressure is mounting. There are more papers appearing in the literature.
Yeah. Thanks, Kevin. Any other questions on the zone committee reports, the triennial reports? All right, so we've got a set of resolutions here that are looking pretty good. Do I have someone happy to move them? Yeah. Sarah, thank you. Seconded. Andrew, is there any discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to speak to one of them.
Yes, thanks.
I'd like to speak to the nitrates one. When we made our submission to the Water Services Bill that's before Parliament at the moment, we tabled a supplementary submission from Dr. Tim Chambers, which picked up on a number of these issues. And the reason I wanted to speak in the debate was to highlight something that I hadn't appreciated before he came and briefed us, and that was when the World Health Organization maximum allowable value was set, it was based on acute exposure, which is the blue baby syndrome, the concerns around acute exposure. The heightened community concern that has arisen as a result of the Danish study is based on long-term exposure to nitrates, and that is the issue which has shown an association. Further research is required to show a correlation, and it is then that we will get the World Health Organization to shift in terms of its focus. But we have been talking to Ngaitahu as well, and they are deeply concerned about the nitrates issue. So I think that things are starting to align, but I just wanted to acknowledge the zone committees, because quite frankly, if you hadn't raised it at one of these reports to council, then some of the interests that we have subsequently adopted perhaps wouldn't have been as strong as it has been. So thank you very much.
Yeah, there is one further point too, that all of the springs in Christchurch are fed by waters from the groundwater, and 1 part per million of nitrate is about as much as most of the biota in the streams can cope with.
That's right.
So there's a second fiddle to the whole deal as well.
All right,
So thank you very much.
So we're in debate now, so Yanni and then Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, I want to acknowledge the work that that has been done through the zone committees, and just to highlight, I mean, one of the things that we have in our water management strategy is to really look at understand any emerging contaminant risks and identified any at-risk areas for targeted management and remedial program, and achieve nutrient efficiency targets for the zone, and it goes on, and then by 2020 made progress towards achieving environmental flows and catchment load limits. And then if we go into the latest progress report to 2020, it says really clearly, target 2, review environmental flows and catchment load limits in response to changing monitoring information, new understanding and technologies, and if requested by regional and zone committees, And then target 3, establish and begin to implement a program to review existing consents where such review is necessary in order to achieve catchment load limits. So I think it's perfectly reasonable for us to be saying, do you have concerns with some consents, and what is the process to have those reviewed? You know, I think what's becoming increasingly clear is that far too many consents were issued for irrigation that has had a huge negative environmental impact on our region, and the long-term consequence of that is frightening. But if we're not even able to get to a point where we can slow down, reversing would be great, but even slowing down what's currently happening would be better than doing nothing and waiting for more research. So, you know, I just want to make a plea that I really appreciate the work that the zone committees are doing. You know, it was disappointing in our long-term plan that we didn't put, you know, as I understand it, the staff advice that we received, that our waterways will degrade over the next 10 years rather than improve because we didn't put sufficient budget to it. But we've got a great group of people that are working really hard to try and improve water in our region, particularly around the environmental concerns. And I just wanted to acknowledge the work they're doing and just say, I still think we need to try and do more and be much more proactive in the consenting space. Clearly what's happening at the moment is unacceptable.
Thanks, Yanni. Andrew.
Thank you. It's good that the Banks Peninsula Zone Committee have raised the issue of the proposed logging operation at Mopuku Peninsula. Certainly, I'm aware of this as a significant community concern, and it's good that the Zone Committee are reflecting that in this more formal sense today. There's a little bit of history to it. Mopuku was the subject of a purchase proposal by council a number of years ago, and there was certainly strong community interest in that time, including from the community board, in purchasing that land for both ecological and recreation reasons. And it's that same interest in the ecology of the harbour in particular that leads to the community concerns around the proposed logging operation. The other piece of history, of course, is in exactly the same catchment on land just above Loudon Farm. There was a logging operation that took place a number of years ago that resulted in slash and logs and a significant amount of sedimentation coming into the top of the harbour. That's fresh in people's minds, and the thing that people do not want to see is anything like a repeat of that same local ecological disaster. So it's good that the community board have picked it up. I thank staff for the work, our staff for the work that they've done and the advice they've provided to the meeting today. There is an opportunity, I think, here, if we get this right, to achieve a harvesting of the trees, which is done in a compliant and well-considered and well-controlled way that doesn't involve sedimentation ingress into the harbour, and that quite possibly achieves some of the community aspiration that was sought when the land purchase proposal was put forward. If we can at least get some planting around the edge of the peninsula on that paper road in place, that adds to the ecological value of that particularly special part of Littleton Harbour, that would be a good outcome. So I think the resolution we've got in front of us really addresses some of the things that hopefully could lead to that opportunity. So thanks to the Zone Committee for bringing it forward, and thanks to our own staff for the work that I know has been done in the background to help us get to the point that we're at.
I like what's happening here. One thing that we should not lose sight of is what John said, is if we leave the trees on our road reserve and take the plantation away from beside it, the first time the wind comes up, it'll blow all these trees that are close to their use by date over. So I think we should make sure that we take the whole lot out and have a fairly strong replanting program on our bit of land, because otherwise the trees will go, the plantation will go, our trees will blow over, we'll have to go over there and pick them up, which will cost more money. The logging people are already there, get them gone. The price of logs is the highest it's ever been at the moment, and just do strong planting as soon as they've gone. Just replant straight away. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, like as Councillor Davison alluded to, on the ECAN website, there's actually a really, really good information on this peninsula and the proposed logging and how it's going to be managed. Also about what will be replacing it with regards to expanding the existing native vegetation, etc. So it's a bit of a shame that a lot of this information wasn't included in the report. I think it would really kind of put a few of the community concerns and address those, as long as as my point was, that they are followed and that that is made clear and that is made public and that is given assurance to that community in a public way, whether it's through meetings, etc. Because I do think it's confusing for the public to know where council is, where Environment Canterbury is, and where the crossover is. And I think that, you know, we can have all the palaver with regards to regulatory compliance and process, but it's about getting that through to the community and those concerned, and laying those concerns to rest to show that there is management there and that teamwork. So thank you.
Thanks, Tim. So I'd just like to close by thanking the zone committees again. So Annabelle, Kevin and Gina, thanks for giving up your time as well to come along. And I think this model is working really well. So when you have the ability to actually present your recommendations to us, we can have more, knowledge and information about what you're really wanting and actually formalise action points. So I think that's working really well. And I think we need to recognise just on Moi Puku Peninsula, the work that Paula Smith did on this too is outstanding, that she's actually raised it for a long time. Thank you again for all of this, and thank the Mayor for having prepared a letter, and we'll keep you posted on when we get a response to that. So hopefully it's sooner rather than later. All right, on that note, I'll put the resolution. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Opposed? That's carried. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're up to item 12, the Resource Recovery Report. And have we got Ross? No. Helen.
So Ross Trotter will be watching online and running down the stairs at this point, I suspect.
Okay.
So you
Let's see how long it takes him.
move forward quickly. Thank you. So we've got a presentation which I'll leave until Ross comes through, but we've also got our usual bi-monthly report, and there's just a number of things to draw your attention to there. The first one is the ongoing audit to improve quality in our curbside recycling. So that work is continuing, and you'll see that we've made a substantial improvement in terms of the proportion of contaminated recycling and also the number of bins and truckloads that are being rejected. There is a little bit of fluctuation and a little bit of an increase in sort of May, June, but the general trend is very good. The second point to note is the progress with the organics processing plant upgrade, which is going through its procurement process at the moment, and also the transitional initiatives on the site to reduce the potential for odour in the interim. And the biggest thing there is to reduce the stock of compost on that site. So at the moment there's considerable stock of mature compost that we're progressively moving off that site. A lot of it's going into the paddocks of our wastewater treatment plant, where it's being used for soil conditioning, where we're doing a whole lot of planting to control midges. So it's a big win-win for council that we can use that material so constructively. The third thing of note is the substantive closure of the Burwood Resource Recovery Park. So that Burwood Resource Recovery Park was, of course, an earthquake recovery initiative to take all of the demolition material, and there's an enormous amount of material that's been placed out at Burwood, and also, of course, the sensitive materials from the buildings that were demolished and where people died through the earthquakes. So that work is underway in terms of the landscaping and the planting, and it's looking pretty good out there. There's a couple of photos in the report. And finally, there's a bit of a summary on closed landfills and the remediation work that's underway at those closed landfills. So there may be some questions on some of those. I understand there were some questions raised at the informal, so we're happy to cover those.
Right. Sam. Yeah. Thanks, Helen.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. It's a really good report.
Jimmy.
Just two things from me. Around the curbside collection, so it says that we're not meeting our levels of service with a truck and driver shortage, but we've taken steps to change that. I mean, given it's a core function of council, do you know what steps we've taken to fix it? Because it does seem...
Yeah, we're having some direct negotiations with our providers under the contract.
So what I couldn't work out, though, was has the contract changed where they're not providing a driver and a truck?
No, the contract hasn't changed, but the service provided to us under that contract has deteriorated. So we're working with them to improve that.
So,
It's around collections.
so why would we be negotiating when it's a contract? They're not meeting our level of service.
Yeah, so what we've issued them a notice of direction in terms of not being compliant with the KPIs. There's been a significant improvement since we've issued that notice of direction.
Right.
So we're just working with them. One of the issues has been around the availability of trucks and drivers, and they have now brought on 5 new trucks, new drivers, so we're expecting to see improvement in that area. However, we're monitoring that on a daily basis.
So is there anything we could be doing at our end to get that right? It just seems if we're not meeting a level of service in a core council function, that we should put some urgency around it. So I didn't get a sense from, it says we're addressing the issue, but it's not resolved. So can you just give us a bit more clarity on that?
Yep. So we have been in discussions with another provider as to being able to pick up some of when they're unable to, for example, if it's missed streets, and able to get around all the streets. So we have another option there to step in straight away should they fail in that area.
Right, and they would compensate for that.
Absolutely.
Yes,
under
we
the
wouldn't be
contract.
paying twice. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Mike?
Thank you. Just a question around Barry's Bay Landfill. And obviously there's a report coming back at some stage with looking at the seawall. Are we also looking at the future of that closed landfill and the potential to remove it as well?
That's quite a significant landfill in terms of. It'd be great if we could remove these potential issues from becoming a problem in the future. It'd be great. There is a significant amount of material in that landfill. The damage to the sea wall as has been reported back has just been minimal in a couple of areas. We also have an understanding that there's other repairs to sea walls as well in the area, which we're trying to get the work coordinated, get all that done at once. So at this stage, that would be our recommendation, just to repair that sea wall.
Okay. But will we have some idea, I guess, the future of that area in terms of what we see will happen with sea level rise, future storm events, and the potential of actually it being compromised?
Look, there is that potential. Ideally, there would be looking at an improvement of the seawall. How it looks as you got the wall, and then the actual landfill material is up above that. So there is that potential for that to, if it gets eroded, to come down. So it would almost need to be higher. Yeah. I think when you look at that scenario with the length of the seawall and what the repair costs would need to be to make that more robust, is then when you start to look at, do you want to be taking some of that material out?
Yeah, I guess one of the things we need to take into account when we look to repair the seawall is actually what happens if there was a storm that compromised it, and the cost to the council to actually fix a compromised landfill that actually goes into our system. So it's also looking at that cost as well.
Agreed. And look, and I'd be happy to do some numbers on what it would cost to actually remove. There's a couple of sections with a road running through where it faces onto that sea edge. I'll be happy to do some numbers around what that would look at to remove that.
I guess when we have looking at these landfills that are right along the water edge, actually looking towards the future and saying actually what should we be doing at this point of time to stop any potential problems in the future. Thanks.
That's a good point, Mike. Jimmy.
Questions. First one on page 66. Regarding to those yellow bins, 737 bins confiscated. But before, prior to the reinstate, I just want to know what's the options for those customers or those that are property owners, they can dispose to their the recycling the material. Because I'm concerned that if they put into the red bin, you know, just encourage them to more the landfill the kind of the material. This is my concern. What's options?
Yeah, it's a hard call because, of course, the reason we're taking this action is to stop the contamination of the whole loads. So when we get a number of contaminated yellow bins, if we're over that 10% threshold, the whole truckload can then have to go to landfill. It is concerning that the amount of reinstatements isn't as much as the bins that have been removed. There's a couple of reasons for that. What we have had 150 odd reinstated. We have had converted recyclers. That's where we've identified poor behaviour, but on this, when we've gone back to reassess, that they have been at that gold star level. So their bins have remained. The other side of it too is that we're still going through with the RFID tagging and removing of bins. So in a lot of cases, those bins have been additional to their entitlement. So they've had more than one bin at their option. So when we've taken a bin away, they have actually had another bin, or they've gone and stolen one, which we can identify through the RFID system.
On page 68, regarding the handheld, the battery, the recycling, you have a 7 kind of the receptors. I just want to know, this 7 is covered, currently is 4 or 5, those refuse station, or not? It's outside of the refuse station. On page 68.
We do have them at the eco drops.
Yes.
So there's the ability to take those to those recycling centres of the eco drops for recycling as well.
Okay, that's for the customer. Rest they need to deliver by themselves. Am I right?
They do. So
Yes.
so we've got specific sites, as you see on the map, around, and that's what we've been able to achieve through the funding.
Yes.
That scheme is now going to be developed over Canterbury. We've had a lot of interest from other councils around New Zealand. This is something that Christchurch, that we as Resource Recovery have initiated. So we've had a lot of other interest from other councils and looking at doing this national. The really good thing about it is what we've always intended with this scheme is we want it to be a product stewardship, so whereby the manufacturers or the retailers would step up and take over the scheme. Mm-hmm. And we've already seen one retailer show interest in taking it over, which is ultimately what we wanted.
Excellent.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, I'm going to pause questions for now because I think we should look at your presentation.
Sure.
And then we can have all the questions after that. And so next is Phil when we come back. Do you
Yeah. So I'll just form my notes. Sorry about that. So we have a service delivery review underway. Some of the key recommendations incorporated in is to promote the diversion of recycling organic material from landfill, including investment in resource recovery infrastructure, advocacy for product stewardship programs, consideration of alternative collections methods for glass, and we'll go through that on the final slide there. Changes in collection area for council curbside services. This is where we're looking at the inner city and Banks Peninsula, and offer flexibility in the bins provided and incorporate a charging system for those who do require more volume. Public consultation will be carried out on those recommendations. The there's quite a few interactions that we need to consider as part of this review. The first part, which we've initiated, we've looked at the surveys which have gone out, and I'll talk about those next. Benchmarking, so we've gone out to other councils around New Zealand just to get an understanding of how they go about it, what works, what doesn't. And we have a workshop for elected members in September this year to present what way we got to at that stage. The other bits of work that are going on at the same time is the bylaw review and how that interacts with national the regulations, and also we've got a number of elements there that we've got divided into two parts as we go through. Those are the key things we'll be looking at. The community feedback from the LTP, that's consistent with what we expected. We'd already identified a number of these things. We received a number of submissions, including developers for the moderate density housing, objecting to paying the waste minimisation charge where they're not receiving the actual service. We've also a number of responses received supporting larger bins and the need for more flexibility in the services that we are offering. The feedback so far from the survey, and it only has been out 2nd July, we've had went out to 16,000 residents, we've had 1,212 responses to date. Interesting, the significant proportion of residents fill their red and green bins all the time. That's between 38-41%, and only 29% fill their recycling bins. The majority of the residents are happy with the yellow bin capacity at 62%. However, responses received so far showed a stronger desire for more flexibility over the red and green options. Also, we have feedback that people wouldn't want to pay more for larger recycling and organics, but would expect to pay more for larger bin. And this is part of our work is, how do we incentivise those who want to do the right thing, they want to have more recycling, more organics, but those who do have the requirement of more rubbish, or they're a large family, produce a lot more rubbish, how do we charge for that accordingly? The next one's just a map of looking at expanding their curbside service. That's just a map there of the inner city. That's the current areas. We can increase that curbside collection area and make the inner city area smaller, and we're also working on a number of options of the best way to provide the service in the inner city, and it may not just be one option, it may be a number of options, which is what we'll be working through. And also be looking at Banks Peninsula. We have identified several areas, and Birdlings Flats are a perfect example of where we could be providing that service, the curbside collection service. And on the flip side of that, we have a transfer station there at Birdlings Flat, and that would no longer be required. So that's another issue that we're going to be addressing. Once again, any of those changes will be part of a public consultation process. And finally, getting on to the glass recovery, looking at evaluating a separate glass collection. As you'll see, there's a number of considerations to take into place there. I don't think you'll find any argument that separating materials at source is by far the best way to have clean recycling. Once it's commingled, you're then trying to separate it back out. But some of the considerations are, in particular with the proposed government container return scheme, just the impact that will have on our recycling volumes. And Australia has seen an impact of up to 80% of material not going in the recycling bin. So those are the things we will be considering as we go through. So thank you. If there's any questions.
Thanks, Ross. That's interesting. Okay, so we've got Phil, then Yanni.
Hey, g'day. Thanks, guys. I've got a handful here. The archaeological report for Le Bons Bay, which was coming last month, have we got it?
Yep.
Okay, and is there anything that we probably don't need to know?
Yeah, look, I think in summary, it's pretty low level. They are recommending that we do have someone in archaeology there monitoring the works on site.
Yes.
But from the work that they've done, they don't think there's much risk there of finding it remains.
And you've got a contractor on board and you've let it? Can you allowed to tell me the dollars or not?
Look, I think there's probably been some confusion over the. I believe that there was original option was around the 250k, which we presented to council back in November, but it was the removal of the landfill, which was estimated 750 to $1 million. So that's the budget we have there, and we believe that we're going to be within that budget. We do have a contractor ready to go, but we just need to have that other parts, this consent finalised before we progress that.
Okay, and the one at Bexley Landfill, does that come in around the budget of what you were hoping?
I'm a bit frustrated on this one. We haven't progressed. We've put our consents into ECAN in April. They've come back, asked for more information. We've given them more information. We're back and forth, and we still haven't progressed the works. We've got a contractor there ready to go.
And you don't have to answer this. Would you? I'm not going to put words in your mouth. ECAN should be bending over backwards to help us get this sorted, rather than throwing hurdles in our face. Do you think?
Environment Canterbury are the regulator, and they will behave as the regulator and treat us as they would any other applicant.
Are we doing consents ourselves for it? Do we have to do consents?
Yes, we
apply for consents. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, one of the things I know down there is a whole lot of the rocks that they're going to use for the edge. There's a hell of a lot of really big rocks down there that have come from the earthquakes and what have you. We shouldn't waste those down there. We should take them over to Andrew at Naval Point and use them where they need really big rocks, because large rocks cost a lot of money.
Can we take that offline?
Fair enough. Yeah.
Look, we don't have a requirement for all those rocks.
Because there are other people to talk to about that.
Okay. Yeah. But I just don't want to see them wasted on that job.
All right, happy to look at it as an opportunity, but I'll need to talk to some other people as well.
Okay. The Enuku landfill, I know it needs clay or cover on it. Have we approached people in the area, builders or whoever's working there, people, and I'm saying it'd have to be people you could trust, that would be able to deposit excavated material there, because I know it's a big problem getting rid of stuff from Akaroa. You've got to sometimes cut it all the way back to town, and it could end up, we could get cover there for practically nothing.
Yeah, I reckon that's a great. I remember you mentioned last time it's a great suggestion. Our project manager is aware of it. We haven't started the works there. Okay. We will. We're anticipating to have that complete in November. So over that period, we will make those connections.
Okay. And sorry, Helen, the compost to the oxidation ponds. I went down there and had a look. Are we going to? There's planting there. You've got the water. Then you've got a large area where all the stuff's been dumped. Is it just going to be levelled out there, and that's the bit that's been replanted?
So there are 3 areas that will be where we're spreading compost and we'll be planting. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So it's all of the area between the ponds and the residential area. Yeah. Otherwise, we get midges blown across, and of course we're planting natives. So it'll look better. It'll perform better, and ecologically it'll be a lot better.
So more or less from the edge of the pond to the road, so so-called residential houses, it'll be...
Not completely that area, but there is a very broad area of planting which stops the midges, yes.
Okay, thank you. And one of the things I found out the other day, that the contamination for recycling and selling is only 3%, mainly because they've got, from what I understand, a larger red bin. And I was delighted to hear what you were saying, that we won't be stopping people or discouraging people to have a larger red bin if they're happy to pay for it. Is that what we're working towards?
Yeah, look, we've and Selwyn is a good example because they do offer that flexibility where people can purchase and pay for that service, and we believe that's going to be the next. You know, we've got so far with all the marketing and education, and I think the next thing is be able to provide that additional capacity and reduce that contamination.
Because no matter in the best will in the world, as you said, some people have big families or reasons why they always fill a red bin up through no real fault of their own.
Yeah, because at the moment we're not providing an alternative. We're saying this is your set, that's it, and so we need to be able to offer a solution.
Okay. And the last one, sorry, is it right that our collection guys can't dump at the transfer stations after 4 o'clock or 4:30?
Look, in the contract is specified that the time is 4:30. However, we do allow it to go on beyond that if it's required, depending on the circumstance. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's no way it all has to go to a transfer station. We can't take it to the collection contractor's own transfer station and get it to go through there.
No,
even though it's only 5 metres away from our one.
Yeah, but not the way the contracts are written, because we want that material to come back through council. Yeah, facilities.
Okay, thank you. Done.
Is that it? Finished? Okay, Yanni.
So I just wanted to pick up on the contractor missing its performance. So, like, I guess it's concerning to read about this after the fact, and I don't know if we've had a memo on it. There's certainly nothing on, as I can see, on the council website or in the app telling people that there are service delivery problems. So I'm just trying to understand what proactive communication we've had in that regard.
We have put it through to a memo through. I'm not sure off the top of my head. I'm not sure if it went to councillors. The non-compliance it is marginal in the sense that we allow 1.5 missed streets per day. At the moment, it's currently tracking at about 1.7 missed streets, which is failing that KPI. Where we have taken it to the contractor is where they've had perhaps 20 missed streets in one day, which is unacceptable. So that doesn't happen very often. Like I say, on average, they're around about that 1.6, 1.7, but we want to see that improve, and we want to see a better service to the resident.
So I was just thinking of like the water leaks memo that we finally got, which was excellent, which kind of showed the trends. It showed the kind of where the lag was and then how it was catching up. Is it possible to get, because I just have not, like, we've got this stuff in here which when you read it is quite concerning, but it doesn't actually tell you the scale of the problem.
Okay.
And it certainly, I mean I don't know whether this is a matter for audit and risk, but you know, like, it does concern me that we're seeing COVID being given as a reason, and it seems to me that we just need to get really clear about what the actual issue is and have confidence that the steps taken will actually sort the situation out, given that this is a private contractor, basically. So I don't know.
You send a memo out about that then?
Yeah, so we'll provide a memo on the performance against the contract, what we've done to date, and what we propose to do in the future.
And if it's significant, is it possible to get something going either on the app or on the website? Because at the moment, the reasons listed for the bins not being collected don't actually mention that there's an issue with the contractor.
So that's been the particular issue has been brought back under control. So right, I don't think we need to put anything out to the general public at the moment.
Okay.
However, I take your point that if we see that issue again, that we need to go out straight away.
Okay. Just a few other questions. So, just I think it's unfortunate the terminology around the user charges around the consultation, because basically we already have a user charges system for the bins, the $312. It's just that we're giving more flexibility within the existing charging regime, right? So I think it might be quite useful just to kind of clarify that in the newsline or the communications, that there is already a user charges component or a set component that we charge $312, and we're looking to give people flexibility within that.
So when we get to the proposals, we will have a whole communications plan around that, which we'll bring back to you before we go out for consultation.
Yeah, I guess some people in the community are sort of raising concerns around the impact on like tenants protection, for example, around what happens around landlords choosing a smaller option and tenants not having a choice. So maybe we can pick up some of those concerns.
That does need to be part of the consultation.
I just wanted to check, so I think we've asked, I want to acknowledge the good work that you've done on the reducing the contamination in the yellow bins. I mean, I think, it's a pretty positive story overall, but I think there's some concerns that certainly have been raised with me from residents. And one is that they feel that certain geographic areas are being repeatedly targeted and audited, and that, it's obviously a bit resentful of that, which I can understand. So I think we'd asked previously for some advice around the geographic auditing and what was happening.
Yes, and we did respond to that. So yes, some areas are repeatedly targeted and audited, particularly if they are repeatedly high with contamination. So we follow the contamination with our auditing and focus on those areas.
Can that be recirculated? Sorry, I've missed it.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And the other thing that people have raised concern with me is just the tone. So of some of the letters, and it'd be quite good for us to see the letters going out where people, there's been someone else has contaminated someone's bin. And so I know we've had a bit of a communications campaign around that, but the residents have raised concern with me that the tone is quite, not threatening, but it's quite harsh for people that have done nothing wrong. And so I just wondered if we could see a copy of the communication that's going out and get some sense of the purpose of what we're doing and why. Because alienating people that are doing the right thing, I think, is a concern. And also just like some areas we have got a huge issue with rubbish in general. And like there's certain parts of the city where based on demographics, we're seeing a huge influx in people illegally dumping rubbish on the street or in people's bins.
That's correct.
So that's a generic letter that you send out, or put in?
Well, there's a series of letters.
It'd be nice if we could see those of the whole committee.
Certainly. So we'll send a memo and attach those for you.
That's awesome. I've just got one question also on the maturing compost in the windrows. What's about the percentage of that that's now been removed off site at the organics processing plant? Do you know?
Of the matured compost material?
Maturing, everything outside.
So we make a distinction between maturing, so it's continuing to compost, and matured, which is stored outside as a stockpile. So be good to know which one if you're interested in perhaps both.
Are they both outside?
Yes.
So you're removing both?
At the moment, we're removing the mature compost, but we're looking at trialling the maturing compost as well.
So how much of what's the ratio between the two types of compost for a start? Which is the bigger amount?
At the moment, it's about 80% mature.
Yeah, it's a continuous process, so you've always got more material coming in, which is then screened, it's and put into
So how much of the matured has been removed, do you think?
Right. So there's about 4,000 tonnes have gone already. What we've agreed with ECAN as part of our transitional plan is to provide updates to them and to the community every fortnight. We've actually set up a time-lapse camera, and that is part of the reporting, so you can actually visually see the reduction in compost on site.
Right.
Because we found that was probably a better way of showing it rather than just numbers, because numbers may not mean too much. We are aiming to, we did have a bit of a hold up in June with that because of the wet weather, and most of the material is going out onto farms or to the wastewater treatment plant, so access became a problem. So there was a reduction over June, but we're back on target. About 250 tonnes a day have been removed.
Right. So what's set in it as a percentage?
Percentage-wise, I think we have had about 15 to 20% removed, but that will be, I do have a graph on that.
And do you think that could
So
be...
about 15%, yeah.
Yeah. Could that be adding to the odour when it's actually moved?
We have been asked that question. It's no more than would go out over a peak period. So when the sales, the peak, are sort of over about October, November.
Yeah.
So there's no more tonnage that would be moved during the normal process and loading out over a peak period. So no, we don't believe that is adding to any odour.
All right. Thank you. Oh, Phil.
Sorry. So the stuff that's gone is only the finished stream matured stuff. All of the unscreened stuff is quietly working its way through the system.
Maturity.
Okay, thank you.
All right. If there's no more questions, Yanni.
Sorry, just two things. Sorry, just the map that you had in your presentation around the inner city collection area is. Sorry, I can't read the key and I can't zoom in. Is that the proposed new area, or is that the
existing? Yeah.
Right.
So part of the new area, we've already got an indication from our collections contractor where they can, Cambridge Terrace, an area there which they can include in their normal 3-bin system. So we're looking at getting as much as that covered as we can, and then the remainder will be what we work through.
But just in terms of the survey, is there a clear map of what we've currently got and what we're proposing, and an opportunity for residents to say, actually,
we're not at that level of detail yet. It will go out for consultation, but we're not at that level yet.
all right, can I just feedback that the resident that came to us about 6 or 7 years ago lived on Cambridge Terrace, but the bins go on Kilmore Street, and it'd be good just to have some ability to raise that area being included.
And that will come out through the consultation as well.
Yeah, and that will be one of the no-brainers, if you like. Yeah, should be included.
Okay. Yeah. And then just the other question about the organics, the plant. So obviously there's a report coming out today, I think. So we don't have the June report yet, but 7th of July. Have we got that report? And then I guess the other concern is that, like, you're doing a transitional plan, but it's like you're going to do it and then tell the community and tell us. So is there any ability for us to actually see it before it's finalised, to just, provide some governance oversight, given that this place has got so many non-compliances, ongoing, increasing,
there
it's
will
pretty
be an
frustrating.
opportunity to provide that to you. It will be a tight time frame. It's a 2-weekly report we do to ECAN. So on a Friday, so we could have that to you by Friday lunchtime if that works.
Thanks,
to
Ross.
give you an opportunity before we send it to ECAN by close of business.
I'm just talking about on page 72, where it says these changes will be detailed on a transitional plan being developed in collaboration with Environment Canterbury. Once finalised, the plan will be released to elected members and the community. So I'm just checking if there's any process at us at a governance level to have input into that transitional plan, and to see actually if the community have any chance to have input as well before it's finalised.
So we're treating that as a living document, so that is available online, but we can get that to you if you wish directly. So any suggestions, recommendations, we'd be happy to look at.
I think that might be quite useful. Like, we've got the small group of elected members, and not everyone may be interested in it, but
That'd be great. Thank you.
I think that would be useful. Thanks,
Yanni. All right. Well, if there's no more questions, I will move that we receive the report. Mike, second it. Any debate? Any comments? Thank you very much for a really good report. Thanks for the presentation.
Thank you. Sorry I was late.
Motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Opposed? That's carried. We're moving to the time where we close the meeting. I will ask James Daniels to do the karakia, but just a couple of words for James. I haven't prepared anything because this is your last TWE committee meeting. I know we've got a council meeting tomorrow, and you'll be at that because you've been a very reliable attendee. But I'd like to thank you for being a really staunch deputy to me. You've been a great support and always so well dressed. I think that really helps as well. And thank you for providing the bell to help me keep order. I don't know if you're going to leave that here when you go or not, but thank you, James, for your support, and you've done a really good job as a deputy, and you'll be missed. So we will miss you very much from next week. Thank you.
Kia ora, Pauline. Thank you. And to the rest of the committee, because we're all members of the committee, I have. It's been an honour to be the deputy chair of this committee, and I well remember the moment when I was thrust into chairing the committee with about 2 minutes' notice. So that was a highlight of my time here. But I will miss this role. I value it highly, and I think that more people should get their heads around what this means. And I'll say more tomorrow in the council meeting, but yeah, and particularly our Three Waters environment and infrastructure is vital to our civilised society. So it's been a real honour to be part of this and to be the deputy chair. So nō reira, he mihi whakamutunga mo te hui, ka whakairia te tapu, that is, we've finished our talking. Kia wā te ai te ara, we're off doing other duties for the community. Kia tūroki whakata ai, haumie, huie, taiki. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thanks, everyone. Free to go.